All right, I'm gonna get started. I'm Carlos Morales, Transportation Data Manager over at MAPPA. We'll do quick staff introductions. I'll hand it off to Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Heilman, Communications and Outreach Manager. And I'll hand to Grant.
Yeah, hi, I'm Grant Anderson. I'm our agency's community development manager.
And Lindsay.
Yep, I'm Lindsay Button. I'm a transportation planner with MAPPA.
So those are the people within MAPPA that have been diligently working. Not on today is Owen, who likes to play behind the scenes game, who is actually working on our greenhouse gas inventory. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I'm going to open it up and just go down the list of who I see and ask people just quick name, organization, so we have it on the record. So I have Alex.
Yes, Alex Evans, City Papillion Public Works.
Bridget.
Hi, Bridget Petzla, OPPD. I'm on from the transportation electrification focus.
Dee.
Yeah, I'm Dee, the city clerk in Louisville.
Dee,
Can you hear me?
Yes, we heard you. Dee
Okay.
Gittins. I think those are initials. GGITTINS. All right. Greg.
Hi, Greg White. I'm just here to listen and see if what this is about. And my wife sent me this link, so I signed up and I was looking to maybe start a composting enterprise, but we'll see what happens. And
Excellent.
so that's why I wanted to get some more information to see what this is about.
Got it. iPhone. There's someone who's registered as iPhone. All right. Jennifer.
Jennifer Peters with Black Hills Energy Community Affairs.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
Kent.
Sure. Kent Holm, Environmental Services Director for Douglas County, also part of the MAP and Natural Resources Committee and Solid Waste Working Group.
Robert.
Morning, my name is Robert LaRocco. I'm city planner with the City of Omaha Planning Department, and also serving as the project manager for the developing climate action and resiliency plan for the city, as well as the PCAP, CCAP for the CPRG grant that we're here meeting on today.
Tony, and then Mark.
Tony Fiala, City of Council Bluffs, Solid Waste Management.
Mark Higgins, Citizens Climate Lobby, Omaha chapter.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. We have a lot to try to discuss and try to get through. First of all, we're going to get a little bit into the weeds and try to explain some of the differences. I know there's a lot of information out there. There is a lot of information. There are a lot of discretionary funds. Let me kind of ground set what we're doing and how we're doing it. So first of all, we're working at 3 levels here. The EPA did award several awards. One was to the state of Nebraska, who is also developing their own statewide climate pollution reduction planning. For more information, we have a website. We'll be able to share this presentation to you all and the general public, so you can click on the link. That information is also available on our website. Basically, it boils down to 3 main things. You need to do an inventory for your geographic area. You need to do outreach and engagement to populations and people affected, and really looking at low income communities within your region or geographic area. And then finally, produce an initial report, something that you'll hear us kind of like shorthand by saying the PCAP. We're in the PCAP stage. And the PCAP is just a priority climate action plan. So it's just taking some of the initial inventory information and trying to suss out what are the key or what are the most important in the short term solutions that we can take on to make or to be able to curb some of these greenhouse gases. All right. So that's what's going on at the state. They've held several online meetings and several more are scheduled to be in person in the coming months as we all try to scramble to get this report done by March 1st. The city of Omaha is also participating and is a very great and gracious partner, but they're focusing on the geographic area of the city of Omaha within their jurisdictional limits. Makes sense. So their climate action plan kind of goes above and beyond what is required. And they're looking more towards sustainability and resiliency. What do you do with that? They've held several online meetings. Feel free to visit them at omacap.org. Robert, who's online, is the project manager for the city of Omaha, who has hired this outside firm called Pale Blue Dot. And you'll see a lot of similarities, but the main focus for the city of Omaha is really focusing in on city of Omaha geographic limits. Then we get to this Greater Omaha Climate Action and Resiliency Plan. So what we're looking at is, hey, how does this impact, or what are the inventories for the 7-county region in the Omaha Council Bluffs metropolitan statistical area, which includes the counties of Washington, Douglas, Sarpy, Cass, Saunders in Nebraska, and Harrison, Potawatomi, and Mills on the Iowa side. So instead of just looking at one little community, we're looking at all the communities contained with all these 7 different counties. Again, what we're doing is developing a greenhouse gas inventory within that geographic range, doing some public outreach as we're doing today, and developing a plan. So that's where we're at. We're currently trying to receive all the information. As you might be familiar, some of the data sources and information that we're trying to receive isn't just one single vendor or one single power agency. It's multiple agencies throughout the region because we're dealing with 2 states, 7 different counties. So it makes it very, very interesting and fun. And we'll leave it at that. A little bit of background on where we are and where we're going. Big thing is this preliminary climate action plan report is due to the EPA by March 1st. Then it's followed up 2 years later or a year later with a comprehensive climate action plan. So going into more detail, going into more rigor into some of the findings that we have in this preliminary one. And then finally, in 2027, we have to do a status report. Throughout this time, we are going to be checking in on a biannual basis, I believe, is our reporting schedule on, hey, how are you getting the information? Hey, what are some of the solutions you're getting? And reporting back to the EPA. Now, what are the components? Basically, we've been talking about this greenhouse gas inventory, this outreach and engagement, and what we're really trying to hone in on for the MSA region is really trying to find and or describe some priority projects and or strategies that are currently underway, right? We're trying to look at both the small midterm, so 6 years from now, 2030, what are some of the interventions? What are some of the voluntary measures that certain cities, communities, counties are starting to take shape, right? So say Community X is trying to develop, for lack of a better term, an inventory or find out where they need to put in public EV chargers to help encourage more people to drive EV vehicles. Well, that's an ongoing and existing need. And if that's the need and a priority for the region, we should include it in our plan. And I'll get to the reason we need to include it in our plan, because the EPA has made this into a two-phase process. Phase one is trying to get everyone to develop these kind of plans, these inventories, these look ahead of what the short-term and what the long-term expenditures to reduce greenhouse gases is going to be for their respective geographic areas. And how are those going to actually benefit low-income disadvantaged communities, right? And looking at workforce development. So trying to track all that is very difficult. But what they're really after is, let's figure out what the plan is for the short term and the long term. And then phase two includes implementation funds. So it may not fully grant out a complete project, but it might be able to breach the gap between full implementation and what is currently already started. So that's kind of the important thing. I'll talk more about the EPA implementation grant, which some of you may have heard, more towards the end of this presentation. But this is what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to prioritize and find projects and strategies, see how much those strategies are going to reduce some of the emissions, and look at low-income and disadvantaged communities throughout our region. So speaking of greenhouse gases, I am not a super scientist, so I had to look it up when we were talking about this. Majority of the time, we're going to be talking about carbon dioxide. Fossil fuel combustion is kind of the main one there. Methane, so this is kind of landfill, oil, gas operations, manure, and cattle. Nitrous oxide coming from, again, fuel combustion, nitrogen fertilizers, and then other industrial gases. So what we're really looking at when we're doing these inventories, we're looking at a set of 6 kind of major sectors, right? We have something called stationary, and think about it as in terms of like buildings. The built environment is a different way to describe that too. But what are the stationary sources of carbon or carbon equivalents, right? Mobile sources, all right, vehicles, heavy, light duty, etc. Electricity and water consumption, the generation of those power methods and water consumption, agriculture and land management, forestry. We still have a couple different ways to interpret that lately, as we found out, and then waste production, but waste generation is more appropriate for local communities, or to think about it from a sense of waste production. So next, one of the things that, as we're building our inventory, one of the things that we were able to find is we looked up the greenhouse gas inventories or greenhouse gas equivalents for both the state of Nebraska and the state of Iowa. These are from 2021 reported sources from the state. And lo and behold, it shouldn't be a big surprise, a lot of the agriculture and electric take up more than half the total emission inventories coming from both states. Agriculture is more represented in Nebraska, 45.4%, than in Iowa at 35.2%. But then we see transportation and these kind of like built environment sources making up the other third or half that's left. This is a different way to view it, so you can see the comparison. Nebraska is in blue, Iowa's in red. This is not meant to be political. These were just the quick colors that we got from this sheet. But you can see that on the Nebraska side, agriculture is heavily more represented in their emission output for agriculture. electricity, but lower in transportation and some of these built environment sources. Again, a different way to look at this. We're trying to show you all the information. The way this information is interpreted is million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So what we tend to do is take some of these emission sources, right, like agriculture or electric power generation, and convert those to million metric tons of CO2 equivalents. This is done by a formula by the EPA that provided a lot of the input data for us to interpret. So one of the things that sifting through this information, one of the things that we found was that agriculture is heavily represented, electric power, industrial, commercial, the built environment, and then transportation. With some of the missing sources that we found, or that we didn't find, shall I say, was the waste production and waste management sources. There's no good number produced at the state at this time, or at least in 2021, that showed any of these numbers kind of showing up in our graphs. Water consumption, wastewater and flooding, and then urban forest and ecosystems. There's not a lot of information or data regarding those sources. And let me just take a quick pause because I see there's 9 chats or 9 questions that came up. And I'll take a pause right there before we move on. Lindsay, do you want to take on the chats?
Yeah, so I don't think we have any questions just yet. It's mostly been providing links and getting some organizational information from some of our participants. So we should be good. But if anybody does have any questions, make sure to pop those in the chat as we go, and we'll kind of make sure that we're keeping an eye on those.
Yeah, and I'll be mindful and try to take a pause here at this point, and just make sure we're all in the same understanding and have a little bit of a sense of what we're trying to do, and or take any questions at this time. Hearing none, I'm going to move on. Okay, so what are these potential greenhouse gas measures? All right, so at this point, the city of Omaha has developed certain strategies. They've developed an inventory and strategies for how to combat some of these greenhouse gas issues or concerns. The state has also done the same. And let me see. What's that? Doing that? Okay. We shall fix that. But we'll also provide this information to all our applicants. Hopefully you're able to see it. If you can't, let's zoom in a little. Basically, we took all the sectors and tried to compare all the different solutions and or strategies presented both by the state and the city of Omaha. One of the things that we've noted is that on the state per sector, they're looking a lot at voluntary measures that are looking at incentivizing certain aspects, right? So incentivize heavy duty replacement of vehicles from the state providers, or provide incentives for charging station and or the infrastructure required for that. That's kind of at the state level for mobile sources. And on the city of Omaha, we get a little bit more nuanced, right? Some of the problems and issues that the city is concerned about is vehicle miles traveled. So by reducing that, you're reducing your overall pollution outputs. And so that's a good strategy to like get to that end stage, that end goal of reducing your greenhouse gases. A lot of different cities and other communities have also adopted strategies like that. City of Omaha is actually proposing a 2.5% decrease in their VMT by 2030. Just to give you a sense of what's going on, region-wide, at least for the Sarpy, Douglas, and urbanized area of Potawatomi, we have some of the VMT numbers. It's been pretty steady for the last couple of years. The big dip was the pandemic, but we have rebounded from that back to pre-2020 levels. and or a little bit more in the last couple of years. And you can look at that more at, I wish I had like a little link underneath here, but we just put out our 2022 traffic report, or traffic in the metro area, which is out, where you could get additional details of some of the information that we've gathered regarding vehicle miles to travel and how conditions on the roadways, busways, and walking and biking use has shifted over time. Anyway, not belaboring the point. The other sectors, again, we're looking at potential energy sources for stationary built environment. Again, the state really is prioritizing and looking at ways to incentivize and or provide additional programs for people to take impact, whether it's weatherization of homes, buildings, or other things. That's kind of where the state is kind of trying to promote and provide their solutions. And again, the city of Omaha is taking a little bit more nuanced and different approach, where they're being more cognizant of reducing natural gas sources within the buildings, whether it's, again, residential, industrial, commercial, and or government buildings, right? So public facilities, right? And so they go through a lot more detail. And if you do have a chance to read all these, I do encourage you to join the city of Omaha and their Omaha CAP plan. Really great stuff coming out of there. Again, these are some ideas and some solutions that they've come up with. I'll go through a couple more. Energy use or energy in general. Again, state looking at providing additional incentives and providing kind of more project-based needs for people in terms of, hey, how do we incentivize? How do we provide? How do we promote some of these different systems, whether it's solar, whether it's providing higher efficiency for homes, et cetera, et cetera. The city of Omaha is going, again, a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more, and looking at how do we change the electric source, right? How do we get the amount of energy coming into our region, in our area, to be from more renewable sources? So big challenges ahead, big conversations to come. But this is just giving you a flare. I do encourage you to go through this in more detail. I am just doing a cursory look for you all, but I think after 3 slides here, you get the point. The point is the state is doing a lot of promotion and voluntary incentive methods, while the city of Omaha is looking for additional performance metrics of reducing waste, for example, by 5% per capita within the city of Omaha limits, right? So there's probably a lot more details that come behind that, but that's their big goal and their big strategy. And so that is kind of the question that we have for people in general, is, hey, how do we get some of these reductions in the coming years? And how do we, as a region, right? We're looking at the big region. How do we kind of decide that? And so let me get back to the slideshow here, taking a second or two. Okay, and the reason we're here. So I'm going to stop there, make sure that we've addressed any chat questions, and or if there are questions at this point, happy to take them off. Hearing none, I am going to move on. So this is where I'm going to open up the floor for our discussion of what we're really trying to get at. And we are really trying to find out at the regional level, what are some of the key strategies that we should adopt? Should we be more like the state and focus on promoting and looking for additional incentives for certain aspects? Or should we be a little bit more detailed like the city of Omaha and follow through with that? I'm gonna open it up for discussion. If anyone has anything to chime in or talk about, happy to hear. You don't all have to talk at once.
Carlos, what are some strategies that have been suggested already in your conversations with communities?
Honestly, like I've been doing a lot of research in terms of communities outside the Omaha metro region. What are some of the key strategies that they've done? And I think a lot of them are reflected in what the city of Omaha is producing. Funny enough, it may not be as prescriptive, right? So a general goal, instead of being a 2.5% reduction by 2030, which is a very lofty goal and very wonderful that the city's pushing for that. But maybe for the region, maybe a more kind of toned down version of that would be, hey, let's reduce VMT, and that's a bigger strategy for all of us, right? And not being as prescriptive as saying 2.5, right? And there are problems with that too, right? The less prescriptive you are, the less you have to go by. You know, how do you measure success, right? Is success getting a 1% reduction, 2.5% reduction, right? What does that mean? So it could go either way. I think some of the other things that we've heard, there is a strong interest in the kind of urbanized area. I've been focusing on the urbanized area conversations and participating a lot in the city of Omaha and what they've been saying. But a lot of what the urbanized area has been saying is really looking at how do we curb this, not just through incentives, but actually doing the work, right? And some of that work actually includes, hey, we need to open up our code books, right? Some of the different stationary sources have looked at how do you eliminate some of the gas sources in your residential, commercial, and industrial and public buildings, right? So that includes your heating furnace, that includes your gas stoves, if you have any of those. How do we reduce or eliminate some of those sources and transition over to kind of electric sources for that? How do we incentivize and allow for solar systems and solar arrays on residential and multi-family commercial buildings? How do we do that to increase both the generation of clean energy, but also the increase in demand that we're going to see? So that's kind of what I've been seeing, Kim. Grant, have you heard anything on kind of some of the outer communities?
Other than some electric charging station related questions, no, nothing more than that really at this time.
So Carlos, this is Kent again. One gentleman on the call mentioned something about wanting to know more about potential composting, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And could you relay any, I guess, comments or anything you've heard on the solid waste end in terms of landfill diversion of material, particularly organics?
Mm-hmm.
Anything that you're hearing from any of the communities outside Omaha?
Again, Grant is specializing on the areas outside of Omaha. I'm kind of specializing on the inside of Omaha. But one of the biggest concerns is this kind of, where do we get information and access to the appropriate information? I think in our inventory and some of the things that we've heard has been some of the information is just not readily available, right? But that is a good strategy of developing waste diversion, reducing the amount of waste in landfills that we need. And some of that is kind of backyard composting, and also like doing some higher order or higher magnitude citywide composting for certain cities, and maybe for some communities. That might be a great idea and a great way to both reduce the total amount that they get charged, right? My understanding of and mine is probably very can't. I'll defer to you. I think you know a lot more than I do, but part of the charges also stem from the amount of tonnage that's being taken to the landfills. So, there's a way to kind of reduce those costs and pass those benefits on to local communities, and also do good by the environment.
One thing that I'll add to that, Carlos, you mentioned you don't necessarily, I'm paraphrasing here, have numbers on existing greenhouse gas. That shouldn't be a deterrent for putting strategies in place, because I mean, you just literally say, hey, we don't have good numbers for this yet, or we don't have any numbers for this yet. But it's been shown by other jurisdictions or whatever that by diverting organics out of the landfill, you're going to have a net positive effect on greenhouse gas. So however you want to phrase that, but the point is, just because we don't have numbers on what it is right now, doesn't mean we shouldn't do something.
100% agree. And I think that's our strategy, to look at some of these things where the numbers might be fuzzy or may not be as readily available. There is a continue business as usual case. And if we're able to divert some of the organics and recyclables, how that does change the business as usual curve on some of these emissions. So that's definitely something we're looking into. Again, we're still working through our inventory and getting a little bit more. Like I said, I wasn't super, I'm not an authority or source of information on the waste generation part. As you saw from our earlier graphs, those numbers were not readily available. But as Kent said, just because they're not there doesn't mean that they're not important.
So if I can add to that, I was the gentleman who asked about the composting, and my idea was pretty much what you're saying. Reduce or take out or take the restaurant waste, organic waste, food waste, and compost that. One, getting it out of the landfills. Two, you're creating a compost that you can then use for growing plants or whatever, right? So my question then is, with that, and I was doing numbers to see if it was viable from a business standpoint, and it makes it a little tough because there's a lot of transportation, which adds to the greenhouse gas thing, but you're taking some out by compost and getting out of landfill. So there's a trade-off there, but the volume that makes it difficult, I think, from collecting from all restaurants and then bringing it to a place. So from a business aspect of it, I think it made it kind of difficult. So a question I had was, are there any grants to help with some of that funding? And is that a viable thing?
Yeah, let me preface this. We'll get through this discussion and we'll talk about the implementation aspect of it. And we'll get into like how the money situation works on this. But are any other communities looking at kind of holistic or citywide or region-wide kind of like implementation measures for composting? And it doesn't have to be like fully vetted out. Just trying to find out if there are local communities that are currently working on that currently, or looking at how to implement something like that. If there's any interest within our region.
That I can't say because I've just started thinking about this like 5 weeks ago. So I haven't done a lot yet. It's just like my wife found this because we were talking about it, amongst us, and so I was like, okay, I'll hop on and see what I can find out. So I don't have a lot of any research talking to my buddy or any real data or comments to that, unfortunately.
Well, that's fine. I appreciate you being here, man. I appreciate the conversation. From a past experience, one of the things I do have to say is, I used to work for the city of Santa Monica, and they did have a composting program. So instead of just two traditional bins of one for recycling, one for trash, they also added a third bin into their collection for organic waste. And so the city of Omaha was implementing this both at all the different scales. They did it for residential. They did it for kind of commercial, like, again, food, restaurant establishments, and they did it in all the public buildings. So if you need additional information on that, I'm sure I could get a hold of some people in Santa Monica and find out a little bit more and try to provide everyone additional information on that. But again, it was a very kind of labor intensive. It was a long haul to try to get there. And a lot of different things have to come into play. So not only is it just separating out the different waste uses, but it's also thinking through what we're originally putting in, right? So plastic straws, that's a big concern and something that's difficult to recycle. Whether or not you're having containers for your food, right? So how do we change some of those? Again, not super holistic. If anyone has anything else, glad to hear it at this time.
Carlos, this is Ken. I sent a direct message to Greg in the chat, just mentioning Hillside Solutions, Brent Crampton, the contact there. Greg, if you need contact information there, just get a hold of me. I got to drop off here shortly because I'm having another kind of related conversation with some folks about a very specific potential project related to getting rid of single-use plastic utensils and other stuff, like for restaurants, caterers, things like that. So unfortunately, I got to drop off, but thank you for having the conversation here.
Yeah, and we'll keep seeing you, Kent. Bye. All right.
Mark, it looked like you were trying to contribute something there a bit ago. Just calling on Mark if you had anything you wanted to add.
Well, yeah, I have a question. The state of Nebraska and I believe the city of Omaha both have preliminary priority 1 list of measures that are due in 30 days. So does MAPA have such a list, or in the next 30 days, are you planning to produce that and share that, or?
I think right now we've been working closely with the city. Look, honestly, like, majority of the population is concentrated at the city of Omaha. And so a lot of the kind of urban scenarios are taking place in that kind of area and field. And we do look to the city for guidance. And so I think it's fair to say that we're gonna borrow and then, okay, we're just gonna steal a lot of the ones from the city of Omaha that we've heard or have resonated with some of these conversations that we have. So the landfill and the waste reduction is definitely going to be something that we're going to put up. Renewable energy sources. Again, I'm a transportation guy, so I tend to gravitate towards the VMT reduction and the increase in walking, biking, and transit. Obviously, those are going to be measures that we're going to look for in the region. Look, to put it very bluntly, we are likely going to do a little bit broader strokes for the regional plan, right? And try to be as inclusive as we can, as possible. without being too prescriptive. The main reason, and I think I've been teasing about this EPA grant, but the phase 2 implementation grant from the EPA requires you, whoever's applying, right, to be included in this preliminary climate action plan. And so by providing a broad stroke that is more inclusive of more than just voluntary measures of incentives and promotions, more like the city of Omaha, but in a broader stroke, we could be more inclusive and allow more communities to take part of this. Does that make sense?
Well, that's a little fuzzy, but I could certainly see, I mean, the state of Nebraska Energy Office, they're kind of doubling down on weatherization and electrification. And I'm sure there's communities in the 7-county area that would, there would be funding for low and moderate income housing and so forth, weatherization and that. So I was just curious. There's no shame in using some of the same measures the other agencies have put together. I was just curious if you had something specific, and your group is transportation oriented, so I guess I thought you were going to have more EV chargers or something like that.
Yeah, and
so Mark, we're kind of trying to work within the existing framework as well. So we know that there's the NEVI program that's going to get ramped up once the legislature is able to kind of fix some of those charging for electricity rules. So NEVI is kind of already handling a lot of the EV charging station pieces. We can include that in this plan as well, just to make it a little more robust. But to kind of specifically answer your question, at this time, we don't have a priority list yet. We are working with the city and with the state to kind of see which of those strategies would be easier to implement at the regional level, because we are kind of like a middle ground between the rural aspect that the state needs to consider and the urban aspect that Omaha needs to consider. So we're working closely with both Omaha and the state to kind of narrow down that list at the regional level. And then we're doing this kind of outreach, like these webinars, to try and get feedback from people like you on which of those you think would be most appropriate and which ones we should prioritize kind of at that regional level. And later in the presentation, we're going to link kind of like a survey. We're hoping you guys can take part in to provide us with a bit more detailed responses on those kinds of aspects.
So one follow-up question. There's been active resistance to renewables in some of the counties in the 7-county area by elected officials. So does MAPA have the support of the Council of Officials, or is that relevant?
I think part of that is we're doing some road shows. We were late to the game a little on this, and so it's taking us a little bit to ramp up, but part of it is getting out there and talking about this and kind of trying to diffuse. Look, the honest truth is, the broader and the more inclusive this preliminary, the more opportunities are available for people to tap into additional funds later on. And it's strictly voluntary. We can't force people to join. We can't force people to be part of this. It's those that wish to join, honestly. And so it's not kind of like a strong-handed mandate. It's more like, if you wish to participate, come on and join us in this plan and adventure as we tackle climate change.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Carlos, my name is Luis Marcos. I'm the CEO for the Maya Economic Development Corporation, and I don't have optimal signals, so I've been like hearing parts of it. But I guess my question is regarding agriculture or urban agriculture as part of the. And I briefly saw just something like 30% agriculture. Can you expand on that a little bit? Or
yeah. So I think the state has gone into a more nuanced role with that, mainly because the state is a little bit more rural in nature. And so they separate out their agriculture to be livestock. And then they separate out the livestock between like all the different livestock. And then row crops, right? So the different types of alternatives there. And a lot of the things are, especially for the row crops, are really looking at the watering systems. So instead of being like gas powered, how do we make those electric or solar powered to an extent possible? And then two, how do we provide those incentives to the farmers to be able to do that? So these are more kind of bigger agricultural systems. What we haven't heard too much about has been urban agriculture. So if that is a need within the region, happy to include it in our plan. And Lindsay, if you took notes on that, thank you very much, because I'm sure you did.
I have a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos.
No problem.
Go ahead, Dee.
Okay, I'm from the city of Louisville, and I know you want to, you want to have a broad stroke, but if we have a specific project, like a trail system, because we don't have sidewalks in town, that's our main issue. So we're trying to get someplace safe for people to walk rather than drive. So can you add that to your plan?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Done.
Yay.
Yay, granted. No, I think that's a very good point. A lot of people are kind of unable to reach their final destination unless we have proper infrastructure. So definitely going to be part of the plan. If you have any other ideas, feel free to email Grant, Laura, Lindsay, or myself. We'll take them. We'll try to incorporate them as much as we can. But I'm going to move on, if that's okay, and try to explain some of the other stuff. All right.
Will that be included in the survey?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
There is, I know the IRA had a program for walkable communities and safety. I don't, it'd take a little research to pull up the actual agency and title of it, but that may be one that would apply.
Thank you.
And if you have additional questions, feel free to put them in the chat. After today's presentation, we'll try to email everyone and or address people's questions. So regional efforts going on right now. We do have a regional survey, kind of trying to hone in on what are the priorities. City of Omaha has a planning team of 97 people and stakeholders. They're having an open house, I believe, February 13th is the next one. So we do ask you to participate. Again, we're working hand in hand with the City of Omaha on a lot of this. So any feedback and information provided there will get to us as well. We're also working with the Heartland 2050 Natural Resources Committee. If you don't know much about that, please either email contact Kent Holm or Laura, and we'll get you kind of involved in this. So last but not least, implementation grants. So the funding available in this phase 2 is called the CPRG Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant from the EPA. So if you go to EPA CPRG implementation, you'll find the notice of funding opportunity. Basically, it's looking at states, municipalities, public bodies, coalitions of many of these groups coming together for greenhouse gas reduction measures. So these are programs, policies, projects, and or measures to reduce greenhouse gases. So one of the calls we've taken is, hey, I have this restaurant in my community and they want to install an EV charger. Well, that's great, but I think for this actual request, I think we're looking at a broader sense of how do we implement that. So not just one single, but how do we work community-wide with your power provider, with your local municipality, and a lot of restaurants or a lot of residential uses where we've planned out an investment strategy of say $300,000 for the entire city. I'm making up a number, don't quote me, of how to install these chargers throughout the community within the next 5-6 years, right? So instead of just looking at it from a single point of view, we're asking, how do we get it broad enough to make an impact on these greenhouse gas emissions? And again, this is going to take a lot of work and collaboration. The application process is not real easy. We took a quick gander at it, and to justify some of the expenditures, you have to provide up to 25 pages of background information. 2, you must be included in a preliminary climate action plan. So if the strategy that you're applying for is not included in our region-wide PCAP, it definitely should be included in the state one, if that makes sense. Because if you cannot cite a source for a PCAP, then you will not be able to apply. 2, they're big on coalition building. Many different partners, many different agencies trying to be part of this. And I think the more successful you will be, you are the ones that have your energy providers in the room or as part of your coalition, your local municipalities that are changing and or developing standards for your community to take action. And then 2, interested parties and or private investors that are going to provide some of the funding. And we're looking at just a match and or a way to leverage some of these federal funds. So in this timeline, there is a notice of intent. So if you do intend to apply, it's due tomorrow. Springing that on you today. But what we heard from the webinar, it's strictly a voluntary optional measure. They just want to get a sense of how many people are going to apply. If you have questions, they're due to the EPA March 15th. And the final application is due a month after we submit our preliminary action plan, April 1st. I do believe the city does intend to pursue additional implementation grants at this time. But again, this is more voluntary. If you wish to have your strategy included, let us know. Let us help you. Let us make it part of our regional plan so that you can look for additional funding through this opportunity. Any questions? And I think as part of our goodbye stuff, or
we did have one question, Carlos. It looked like Luis, you wanted to ask?
Yes, I think Carlos is doing an excellent job in still. So if the Maya Economic Development Corporation were an emerging 501c3 organization wants to be part of something like this, and it's due tomorrow. We're part of. We're connected with many different entities here, but I can't say we have a coalition right now.
Right.
So how do we manifest that? How do we just let you know, hey, we're interested? Things like that.
So the thing that's worth noting on this timeline here, Luis, is that intent to apply is optional. It's entirely optional, and it doesn't affect your eligibility or the scoring on your project later down the road. I think the main thing you're going to want to do is probably find some of those public bodies to partner with, because those are the entities that are going to be eligible for this funding. So you want to make sure that you get involved with a group and kind of tie your work to an implementation project that they would want to apply for. But then the thing worth noting, so Carlos has pulled up the slide here that kind of has a couple of the components that are required for the implementation grant application. And there is a lot of stuff here, and it is a very tight timeline. And we're definitely aware of that. We hope that the EPA is aware of that. Everyone we've been talking to is kind of scrambling to put this stuff together just because the timeline is so tight. So if you do have a project that you're wanting to be considered, I would first and foremost get in touch with those public bodies that you can collaborate with, and then kind of hit the ground running as much as possible.
And
On
also
that last,
included in our plan, Lindsay,
Yeah.
included in the PCAP.
yeah, and let us know what that project is so that we can make sure it's included in the PCAP.
PCAP, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, and the PCAP is that
good.
preliminary
Can you
climate
just
action
define
plan that we're
PCAP for
putting
me?
together. Sorry?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So, and that is the action plan that we're currently putting together, and that's due to the EPA March 1st. So we have to get our plan into the EPA by the start of March, and then anyone who has an implementation application has to get that in at the start of April.
And so one key thing, if your municipality or your local government does not have a SAM registration, that takes a month to get done. So the sooner you start with your SAM registration, the better. Please ask around to your local municipalities or local government. County government should also have this. It's mainly required for a lot of these federal discretionary grant opportunities. So if they've received or applied for any of these types of federal funds before, they should have a SAM registration, but just definitely make sure, because it does take a long time to register the first time. Let's see. I think last but not least, we do have our stakeholder survey. We have a little, what do you call those again?
QR code.
QR codes. There we go. The survey's there. Please, please, please take the survey. Anything else we need to say about the survey, Linz? Cool.
No, I don't think so. If you do have a project, there's a spot in the survey for you to provide us with a little bit of info, and then we can follow up with you to get a more detail as needed.
And we'll again share the slides and information for others. If you have more questions, feel free to email me. Thank you very much. And we're just 1 minute over. I tried. And again, feel free to call us and contact us. Grant, Lindsay, Laura, or myself are super happy to help and super happy to get you involved in some of these conversations as much as we can. Thank you very much for your time. That is all I have to say.
thank you all.
Thank you.